Imagine living your life after 50 and feeling energized and excited about your future. Welcome to the Women in the Middle podcast, the podcast for women who are ready to figure out what they want and create the life they deserve. Here's your host and master certified life coach, Susie Rosenstein.
Hey there, today we're talking about career grief and moving forward in midlife. Let's go. Welcome back to the podcast Women in the Middle. I'm your host, Susie Rosenstein, your master certified coach and midlife mentor, and I am so glad to be here with you again. I really am. Now, as you probably know, my mission is to help you stop living like time doesn't matter in midlife, because it does. We just can't continue living in an autopilot fog if you want to be everything you want to be, right? If you want to be that person, become that woman, enjoy your life, be fulfilled, all the things. Life is just too short for these shenanigans. Being more intentional is where it's at. That's what the cool kids are doing. So I have a great guest interview for you today. We're going to be taking a deep dive into what it's like to grieve a job that you loved or hated, and then what it's like to move forward in midlife. I'm sure you may be able to relate to this. Maybe it's happened to you, or maybe to someone you know. It can be pretty intense and stressful, that's for sure. But don't forget, we're also going to be talking about the moving forward part, so don't worry. But just quick, there are two things I want to make sure you know about. As a listener of the Women in the Middle podcast, I wanted to make sure that you know how we can work together. That might be on your agenda. As you might be aware, I help midlife professional women get unstuck and reconnect with their desires so that they can move forward with clarity, confidence, and courage, fully honoring the privilege of aging and embracing what is still possible. It is so important to stop wasting any more time feeling stuck. In the end, it's all about regret-proofing your life, my friend, and it's the fastest way I know to rediscover joy and purpose after 50. Now, I have a variety of options available, both private and group coaching. So the best thing to do if you're curious about what it would be like to coach together and actually put yourself first is to just reach out and see what might be a good fit for you. So head over to www.talktosusie.com and you can set up your appointment and we meet on Zoom. It's actually kind of fun. Okay, hope to see you there. And the other thing is that I now have a quiz that will help you find out what's keeping you stuck and how to move toward the life you've been putting off. It will help you understand what your future self is craving. It's free, it's fun, and it's fast. Go to www.midlifequiz.com and help yourself get the insight you need to go after what you're excited about in your next chapter. So good. Head over www.midlifequiz.com. Okay, now let's dive in. My guest today is Laverne McKinnon. Today's interview is about grieving the job you loved or hated and moving forward in midlife. Laverne's story is so interesting. She basically went from being a film and television producer to being an executive and leadership coach, writing a book proposal that received multiple offers of representation, and also writing a successful blog. As I mentioned, Laverne is currently an executive and leadership coach, specializing in career transitions, whether recovering from a setback, embracing a pivot, or stepping into a leadership role with confidence. Her upcoming book, Showstopper, explores career grief and transformation, reframing setbacks as plot twists that offer the chance to rewrite our stories and shape our futures. A former senior executive at CBS and Epix, she executive produced Netflix Girl Boss, teaches at Northwestern University, and is a mentor for the CAPE Leadership Fellowship Program. Midlife transitions and change like this can be tough, and when you're grieving this type of loss, it can also be difficult to talk about, which is why it is so important to talk about it here. I know you're really going to appreciate and enjoy this interview. Hi, Laverne. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Women in the Middle podcast.
I am so excited to be here.
I'm excited too. I loved our little pre-conversation. I feel very comfortable with you, and I know we're going to have a lot of fun. So the first question I love to ask people, like you have such an extensive background in corporate, and I know we're going to talk a lot about that, but specifically, what was going on for you in your 40s?
Well, my 40s were the best of times and the worst of times. I adopted my eldest daughter in my early 40s. I had reached a pinnacle of success in my early 40s when I was the senior vice president of drama development at CBS. And then it was the worst of times because I also, I guess in many ways, like I peaked in my 40s because I was fired from that job at CBS. For me, it was very unexpected. And even though I went on to a couple of other fancy pants, high profile jobs, that experience of being fired, it was always an undercurrent for that decade of my life because it really it shattered me. That really, and it haunted me for a long time.
Wow. I can really appreciate what you're saying. And I'm having a bit of a flashback myself, which of course we don't need to talk about now, but you used very strong words about how devastated you were. And I'm so sorry that that happened. Now, when you were in your 30s, were you on this same road? Like this is where you wanted to go so that you were at the pinnacle of success in the 40s? Was it your main goal?
It was. I had a hope, a dream that I could rise up through the ranks in corporate America, and I did have an incredible run for 10 years. I was promoted every 18 to 24 months at CBS at that company. And so it reinforced this identity that I was competent, that I was capable, and I clung to that identity so much. So when I was fired, that's the thing that got shattered into, 1,000 little pieces. And I don't, I know a lot of women who've also experienced like this trajectory and this high, and then suddenly things get ripped out from underneath neath us. And there isn't a safe space or a place to really talk openly about those types of professional heartbreaks. And so I'm using the royal we. For me, I wound up really as a good Midwesterner. I suppressed, I denied, I negated because I just was like, I just have to pick myself up and keep going. And so it's like the 30s were awesome trajectory, and then the 40s were, the recovery from getting a little bit too close to the sun.
Oh boy, it's like wah wah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm only, I'm laughing with you, not at you. I was very grateful when I got laid off in 2013. It was very scary, and I felt betrayed, and my heart was racing. I felt sick to my stomach. I was asked to follow my manager to a meeting, and I asked who was going to be at this meeting, and it was HR, union reps, the VP, whatever. It was terrible. And I remember in that moment thinking, this might be a good thing, but I feel sick to my stomach. But this might be a good thing. How dare they do this to me? But I think this is really a good thing. It was like just chatter in my head. I really did think it was a good thing because it was the year I turned 50. And I had been fantasizing about a change for so long. It was just fascinating how, even though I was pretty convinced it was a good thing and the gift I couldn't give myself, that I still had all that chatter and exactly what you're saying, that identity and that concern that it was about performance. And I was very grateful that my manager told me specifically that it had nothing to do with performance. So that helped. And it was very surprising. My behavior surprised me because I thought when I was fantasizing all those years that I'd be skippity doo-dah running down the hall, doing that little theatrical sidekick that dancers do so well. So I can tell you've thought so much about it because your words, they were just so descriptive. So that's a lot of pain. And then you also had some amazing things happening in that time of your life as well with your kids.
Yeah, it's like becoming a mom for the first time I guess I was, I was like 40 or 41. And I actually didn't think that I wanted to be a parent. I was so focused on my career and my ambition and my achievement that I felt like it was like very late in life that I was like, wait a second, I actually do want to be a parent. And when we adopted our child, our eldest daughter, it was roughly like 9 months later that I was fired. And so it was, and also to be completely transparent, my marriage was in disarray at the time as well. And so it was such a fascinating time of these, like, again, like these high highs and these low lows. And honestly, I had no skill or tools to process what was happening to me, of like the joy of being a parent, but also the insecurity of like, I don't know how to do this. And then I felt safer at my job than I did being home as a mom and a first time mother, that I honestly, I escaped into my job. And then to have that job taken away from me. And now I'm like, wait, how do I be a mom? My identity was, again, just destroyed. So it was a really confusing and baffling time. And because I had this identity being competent and capable, I felt wildly uncomfortable with sharing the struggle that I was going through with people.
Wow. Did you get some professional help at that time?
I had been in and out of therapy, and
Thank
I'm
goodness.
in therapy, but it wasn't helping me. And
Oh,
I finally did go to a friend, and I remember this so clearly, Susie. We sat down and I literally like confessed. It had the energy of a confessional of like, I don't know what to do. I don't like, I'm miserable. I'm lost. And my friend said, have you ever considered working with a coach? And at the time, I didn't know what that meant. And so I was like, well, I'm not an athlete. I was like, I work out, but I'm like, and I'm not really clear how sports is going to help me, but I'm willing to try anything. And he's like, it's not that type of coach. This is like someone who can help you with your life. And because I was at the end of my rope, I was like, well, if she's accepting new clients, I would love to talk to her because I don't know what to do. And my first coach, her name was Mona Miller, and we worked together for about 8 months. And then tragically, she died in a car accident. Rest in peace, Mona. Her last voicemail to me said, you know more than you think you do. We'll talk on Tuesday. And I held that so close to my heart. But those 8 months of working with her as a coach she saved my life. It was so transformational.
yeah, it is transformational. And it's so different. I agree. Like the first time I got coached, I went in there fully expecting the coach to cross the line of therapy. I was like on the lookout for it, and it didn't go there at all. And I realized I had no clue what coaching was. And my transformation and insight was massive. So I'm so happy that you had a good experience and that you met her exactly when you needed to meet her. And what a tragedy that is. I'm so sorry to hear that. I even teared up just now. Like, have to. Oh my goodness. So, what happened for you then with applying for jobs while you were in corporate America? It's because you mentioned in your notes that there was a bit of ageism happening. So, what were you realizing?
Yeah. This was, it was, I've always been aware of ageism. And part of the challenge that I have is I think I'm a special snowflake. And okay, that happens to everybody else. It doesn't happen to me. And I'm not a special snowflake. And I was in my 50s. And at the time, I had a production company, but things were shifting in the entertainment industry. And I didn't feel completely confident about the financial success of the company. So I felt like I needed to go back into corporate America.
So,
And
hang on a second. So, after the big situation in that last job, what was your next step?
I had a production actually, I misspoke. After I was fired from CBS, I wound up running television for a director, and then that company went under, and I wound up having my own production company. And then I went on to a very high profile job. I was the first programming chief at Epix. So I was back into corporate America for a couple of years. And then I went
So,
back.
so you kind of got entrepreneurial there in the beginning with your own production company, but you did go back into corporate.
I did. And because I had this mistaken belief that corporate was safe and secure, and being an entrepreneur, wow, that requires a level of scrappiness, and I wasn't really emotionally prepared for it. And then after Epics, I'd had a couple of like quote unquote smaller but high profile jobs. But then I really wanted to get back into corporate again with this mistaken belief. And so Susie, I was so clear. I was like, I know exactly the types of companies that I want to work with. They have to have a strong brand. They have to have pockets. They have to want to do something entrepreneurially in terms of expanding their footprint from a film and television perspective. I interviewed for 3 jobs that checked off all of those boxes. I got down to being either like the last of like 2 or 3 candidates. I ultimately was not offered any of those jobs. And when I did my research to find out, okay, how are all of those like swings and misses? Because I got so close. And it turns out that the people that got those jobs were 20 years younger than me on average and had more recent wins. And so I was faced with this data of being like, I've like missed, I don't want to say I've missed my window because I had so like an extraordinary career in so many ways, but in my 50s, I was not being hired for those coveted corporate jobs in the same way that people had been looking at me in my 30s and in my early 40s.
Interesting. So it was that you had a bit of a gap by being an entrepreneur in there, and you had been aging obviously at the same time.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, 20 years younger. That's like,
yeah. And it was, and I had been exposed to research that women peak in corporate America in their mid 40s and that men peak in corporate America in their mid 60s. And so I was really like seeing this and experiencing this. Now, granted, do I believe that ageism had a part of it? Yes. But I didn't have huge recent wins. Like my wins on my resume, while they were there, they didn't have like the height of it. Like because I could say when I was at CBS, I was part of the team that developed the CSI franchise. I was part of the team that developed the Criminal Minds franchise. The wins that I had at Epix and in the smaller entrepreneurial jobs, they just didn't have the same, excuse me for using this word, but the same sexiness. And that combined with my age, I think just didn't take me across the finish line with the jobs that I was going after. It was a hard truth. It was, it was a tough reality to face.
yeah. And I guess what I was thinking was, didn't they value your entrepreneurial skills that you'd been developing? But I guess not. I've never worked in corporate like that. So I guess that it wasn't something that they were looking for.
Yeah, it's one person's experience, but I'm curious, like with your clients, with the guests that you have on your podcast, how much is ageism their experience?
Oh, it's there. I've had several people talk about it, and also somebody had written a book about it. Yeah, it's definitely there. And there's all kinds of guidelines and strategies and tips on how to handle your resume and coaching around how to talk about your experience um, in a way that helps feature your successes and wins regardless of your age. But I also had a mistake in the way I was thinking about longevity at my job. I had been at my job for 19 years, and it was a 27-year career in health education and health promotion. And I always thought it was a good thing because when we grew up, if you're a good girl, you're going to have a lot of experience and you're going to have longevity in one place. And that kind of thinking, I really thought it was a good thing and that it was valued. It really did. And it also then created a lot of fear for me when I did get laid off, and when I was thinking about at the beginning, before I became an entrepreneur, I was thinking about applying and getting another job, a job job. And I really then realized that it may not be an asset. Things are changing. Certainly when I talk to people in my kids' age group, like the mid to late 20s, early 30s, they don't think about it that way. It's very common to have a shorter term job and to move on to the next job. So they see that kind of skill in having a wide variety of experiences. So part of it is the way we think about what's valuable too. Did you find that?
I'm nodding vigorously right now because I do think it's generational, and like my parents taught me and really instilled in me this belief of like being loyal to the company, being loyal to the boss, and as a way to be safe and secure and have that longevity in like one particular company or industry. But times they have changed.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way anymore, but it's ingrained in me. And so when I was fired, when certain jobs didn't work out, it was hard for me to look at that objectively, where like with your experience, it had nothing to do with your performance. It was a layoff. It sounds like there was some downsizing. With me, it was, I wasn't laid off. I was fired. And what I've come to see is that having grown up at this company for 10 years, that I had changed, I had evolved, and the things that were important to me when I started, there was a misalignment in terms of values.
Yes.
So, and I also had the mistaken belief that because I had like quote unquote grown up in this company, that I was allowed to push back, that I was allowed to question the strategies. And it was like, absolutely not. That wasn't okay. And yet I was sort of like a rebellious teenager. It's like, no, I have ideas. I have thoughts. This is, ways that we can improve our processes. But the company wasn't interested in that. And so it just wasn't a match.
Yeah, it wasn't a match, right? And when things aren't a match and it's not emotionally loaded, you can just see that it's not a match. And if it's about your misalignment, if you've actually identified your values and have a really clear understanding of priorities and what you want, of course you want to be in a place where there's more alignment.
Yeah.
But when there's all this other drama going on in your mind and the history, it's very painful. So what I'm seeing though is opportunity, opportunity, opportunity everywhere. But when you're in it, it's harder to see, especially you had more flexibility to be with your young family.
Yes. And it definitely being an entrepreneur, I love that I was in control of my time. And so that I could say, okay, I'm going to get the work done, but it doesn't have to be within these particular hours. And I do feel like, going back to this idea of identity is that as women in our 40s, 50s, 60s, that we do have this incredibly rich opportunity to define who we want to be and define what success means for us. And that in being able to create that space to say, okay, what was I taught and is that still serving me? Do I actually embrace that? And I think that I have shed probably 90% of the values that my parents taught me. And there's nothing wrong with those values. They just didn't apply to me anymore because our lives were so wildly different. And work is very different today than it was for my folks, 60 years ago or 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. So one of the things you noted earlier I ask my guests all kinds of questions before you come on, and I'm staring at one that I put in bold. You made a statement that you always wanted to support underdogs achieve their dreams. Now, when did you appreciate that thought in this part of your journey, enough so that it was going to guide you to do something for yourself in a very different way?
I love this question because in so many ways it goes back to my parents, is that my parents were underdogs, that neither of them had graduated from high school. My mom grew up during World War II. She lost her father, abandoned their family, took her brothers to Korea, left the mom and my mother and her sisters. And so my parents were underdogs, and my mother experienced a lot of racism when she came to the United States. So I think that's always been part of like my undercurrent, but it all crystallized for me when I started my own companies and I started coaching, where I found that the clients that I was really drawn to and just had so much natural chemistry and magic were people who had experienced marginalization in some form in their lives, whether it's women who have peaked in corporate America or artists who were really struggling with being able to tell their stories or get their foot in the door. Definitely people who come from lower income communities or situations who don't necessarily have the resources. To be very specific to the entertainment industry, there's a part of the culture where you work for free or you work for very, very little money in order to get your foot in the door. And you don't do this for just a couple of months. This is like years. Like people have been in these entry-level positions for 4 or 5, 6 years. So it requires a kind of subsidy, like financial subsidy by family or working, multiple jobs that a lot of people just can't do. And we're story is being impacted because of these barriers to entry. So I feel very passionate, yes, about supporting people who may not have resources to help them figure out workarounds to break in.
I love that. I mean, usually I find that the key to getting unstuck is to really think about things you always loved. Think about things that you always were attracted to. What are the documentaries you always gravitate toward? What are the books that you always love? And so you just said that this whole underdog story is a part of your passion.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like, it's like, I think I always I guess I see my mom and my dad in some form in terms of everybody that I work with. And I'm feeling very nostalgic right now of just like if either of my parents had had someone who would have mentored or advocated or coached them. And obviously those are 3 very different things what a difference that would have made in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So then what happened? How did you end up becoming an indie film and TV producer?
Well, in part because I was not able to get the corporate gigs. And so having to face those hard truths that I had probably aged out of corporate America. And so I felt like I could continue to devote myself to, trying to knock down those doors, or I could say, what are my gifts? What are my talents? What am I really passionate about? And how can I course correct how I return those to humanity? And so that's when I partnered with my former business partner, and we started a film and television company. And I coached as like a side hustle as well, because I loved coaching so much. And so I did those 2 things concurrently, had a film and television company, and we were impacted by the pandemic, by COVID, by lockdown, by writer strikes, actor strikes. And so I dissolved that company last year, a conscious loving uncoupling with my business partner, because it was just a business model that was no longer working for me, and focused exclusively on coaching, which has been incredibly rewarding. But I guess the theme here for me is facing hard truths and taking the blinders off and being able to say, this is wildly uncomfortable, this is painful. But once I've been able to face that at different times in my career, I've then been able to this is, I think, a theme in the work that you do is like, okay, what's the opportunity here? Because there's always opportunity.
Yeah.
And I had to take the blinders off to be able to find the opportunity. And there was a lot of opportunity.
So what did you notice about how you figured out who you wanted to work with? Did you work with underdogs? Did you stick with corporate right away before you figured it all out?
It was such a messy experience because I said yes to a lot of people just because I didn't know how to filter in terms of what I'm passionate about, what I'm good at. And so I did have several clients where it's like, oh, you know what, this actually isn't a match. And then because I love research and I love data, I started to really write down and analyze, okay, here are the clients that are achieving really awesome results. What's the commonality here? And how do I feel about them? How do they feel about our work together? And so I was able to then start to really identify, really, there's people in transition, people who are ready, willing, and able to do the work, people who still are like longing um, to find the vitality in their talent and are feeling stuck but don't know why. And then the other theme within that is the usually people who are feeling marginalized in some form. I want to say one other thing, which I think is so fascinating. A lot of my client base right now, Susie, are people, are men, white cisgender men in their 50s and 60s who have been downsized, laid off, and are unable to find work. And I wouldn't typically categorize them as underdogs or marginalized because they've, rode an incredible wave. They are now feeling like they are marginalized, which I find absolutely fascinating.
How are they finding you?
Through LinkedIn primarily and my Substack.
Wow. So, one of the things that you mentioned earlier on when you were talking about your identity is this grief. Could you tell me a little bit more about that emotion when it comes to a career that just doesn't work out the way you want it to?
Yeah, it's grief is really like going to be my life's work, specifically career grief. And it's a form of grief that is called disenfranchised because it's not publicly mourned or socially validated or even openly acknowledged. And so many people like me have devoted their lives to a particular career path, or they've become incredibly invested in a project or an initiative at work, and then it doesn't come to fruition in the way that they had hoped or dreamed. And they feel such a depth of loss around that. That is professional heartbreak. Harvard Business Review actually published an article about 6 weeks ago on this topic, and it's now being more widely recognized as a legitimate form of grief. Now, not everybody feels grief after being downsized or laid off or fired or having a project tank. It's really contingent on the depth of attachment to the person, place, or thing. That's what really brings forth the grief. So if you weren't necessarily attached to your job or to the project, you might not feel sad. You might not feel grief, which is completely fine. So for me, I was so attached to the identity that job at CBS had. But at the time, I didn't know that that was an event that was worthy of a mourning process. And so I'm such a, getting on my soapbox of wanting to give permission to people to mourn their career setbacks, because studies have shown that when loss is not processed, it leads to then a loss of resiliency. And resiliency is required to have a long and fulfilling career.
I love so much of that. You'll have to forgive me at my end. Of course, I don't know. I think you saw my dog walked in and I just put the sound off and just hope that he would find another place to hang out. I just want to go back for a second to where you were talking about disenfranchised grief. And I just, with career, I'm just thinking about when I first learned about what that meant. It was a million years ago in grad school. I was doing research on children, the relationship between children and their pet dogs. And I was deep into the literature about pet loss and families and all that stuff. And that got discussed in that same way where, when a pet dies, it's very intense for many people. And yet it's common not to feel comfortable expressing that grief because a lot of people are judgy about that.
Yeah, because it falls into that category of, oh, well, you could get another dog, you could get another cat. Oh, why are you feeling so sad? You have this amazing new job. And the two things have nothing to do with each other. It's like it's not like grief isn't a hole that gets filled by something else. That hole will always be with us. And through a mourning process, we can change the relationship with that hole so that it can represent the love of that attachment and the longing and the missing, as opposed to the pure pain of it.
And I love the way you talked about resiliency as well, to, being key to move forward. But you can't do that without processing that intense emotion. So this all makes perfect sense why and how you ended up focusing on mourning career setbacks and giving permission to mourn. I actually have a wand right here. Now, as a listener, you can't see it, but I give permission to my clients all day long. But it's usually about permission to try new things, permission to be easier on yourself and more compassionate with yourself. But giving permission, we have so many thoughts about what we should be doing. And the shoulds can all that negative stuff, it just really doesn't help you grow forward. So what would you say your biggest lesson was from the whole experience of, having a big, giant, painful career setback, experiencing to this new idea, starting out as an entrepreneur, and then continuing on with another pivot into coaching?
My biggest lesson or takeaway from is that as human beings, we are meaning-making machines. And when we make up meaning, our brains reward us with a hormone rush, and it feels good. The downside is that the meaning may not be true. We're just rewarded for whatever we create. And so my biggest lesson and what I've really learned is to really interrogate the meaning that I'm creating of the experiences that I'm having in my life, and specifically professionally. And so I've really been working hard. I'm not great at it yet, but to stop defining things as good or bad. They just are. And are the things that are happening, am I living my values? Am I living my purpose? And if not, what do I need to adjust and course correct so I can be in alignment with what's important to me, as opposed to living other people's values?
So good. So tell us about how we can get a hold of you. I know you have a Substack.
Substack is an incredible platform. I hope that people will check it out if they're not already available on that. Just my name, Laverne McKinnon at Substack. I'm also known as a moonshot mentor. It was a term that was coined by one of my clients who said, "Oh my gosh, you just really helped me achieve my moonshot," which was really, really lovely. I'm also on LinkedIn as well, Laverne McKinnon. Those are the two best ways. If people are interested in learning more about how to work with me, my website, lavernemckinnon.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laverne. You really shared so authentically about an experience that's more common than we think, because nobody's talking about it. So I really appreciate that. And giving permission to grieve something like a career setback or some kind of professional loss is really important. So thanks so much for joining us on the Women in the Middle podcast.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Okay, that's it for this episode. What came up for you as you heard Laverne's story about grief and professional heartbreak? I had flashbacks galore about my experience being surprised by a layoff from my 19-year job and how it ended up being the gift I couldn't give myself because my second career is so incredibly creative and fulfilling, like beyond my wildest dreams. I love that Laverne is raising awareness about this important aspect of the working world. It's also such a great reminder that good things can emerge from difficult times. As Laverne shared, career setbacks are worthy of grieving, and giving yourself permission to grieve can free you to pursue your dreams, and that is a very good thing. Okay, thanks so much for listening to the Women in the Middle show. My focus as your regret-proofing midlife coach is to help you waste less valuable time and get on with the good stuff. Remember, being the queen of your brain domain is the best way to be. My friend, it's time to stop waiting for the right moment and start creating the happiness, excitement, joy, and fulfillment that you crave. Reach out if you would like to talk about coaching together. I've got several options that might be a good fit for you. So don't waste any more time. Head over to www.talktosusie.com. And don't forget to head over to my new midlife quiz to discover what's been keeping you stuck and learn what your future self is craving. Go to www.midlifequiz.com. For show notes and links, go to www.susierosenstein.com. and click on the podcast tab and look for episode 435. You'll also see a link there for my other show, The Women in the Middle Entrepreneurs, which is all about the reality of running your business when you're a midlife gal. It's also on iTunes, Spotify, and all the podcast places. Let's do this, ladies. It's time for you to put yourself first, one thought at a time. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.